hard work and dedication of the thousands of teachers, principals, and staff that have occurred over the last weeks and months in preparation for the beginning of the school year. It goes without saying that at the heart of each and every action they take is a desire to serve our students. And I think it's important that we also really recognize that we're at a moment in time that none of us could have anticipated a year ago. None of us as parents, as community members, as families, as students throughout the district would think that we would be grappling with the reality of a global pandemic and what that would mean in upending our lives and creating additional anxiety and stress and trauma that we're trying to meet head on and figure out how to navigate. What I want to say is that we have no intention to sow division. I think it is incredibly important that we do everything within our power to create, I would say, some certainty for our parents, for our students who are looking for clear expectations of what their school year will look like. I think it's extremely important to recognize that our parents and students are feeling a tremendous amount of fear and anxiety that is just exasperated by the pandemic and the inability to connect with their peers and the staff that they love and the school communities that they connect with so deeply. For me, as someone who's spent my career in civil rights advocacy and issues of trying to ensure educational equity, I know that for decades, our system has failed to meet the needs of the majority of our students. Students like my own children who are 8 and 10 years old and started the school system challenged because they didn't have access to foundational learning that so many of their peers were fortunate enough to have. And so we as a district, in partnership with our teachers, our principals, and our staff, have really a moral imperative, both to meet the learning potential of our students, but also to fulfill the legal obligation of our service. And what we know that means is making sure that every student, irrespective of where they live, has the opportunity to access a quality education, that our special education students get the support they need to reach their full potential, and that in the time of a crisis like this global pandemic, we are showing up for our children. And so I want to say to our parents, to our community members, to our students, to our teachers, thank you for showing up. And our commitment is tomorrow, though it will be challenging, we will be there to meet your needs and we will make adjustments as necessary every step of the way.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Angie Sutherland from Coalition for Students with Disabilities.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this conversation. If you're not familiar with the Coalition, we formed in 2018 as a way to amplify the voices of students with disabilities and their families in our school district and beyond throughout the state. I have a 14-year-old who's a Sac City Unified student who receives special education services. And for me as a parent, and for many parents that I know, all of this chaos just adds to the situation that students with disabilities are already underserved. We're already somewhat segregated, and this just adds on another layer to everything. And I feel like the work that the district's been trying to do over the past few years is always being squashed because it's considered to be a bargaining issue. So there have been so many things that the district has tried to do that, like with inclusive practices, district-wide assessment, social and emotional learning, and positive behavior support. Those things have all been blocked because of SCTA demanding to either develop the program themselves or not have it at all. And so when this distance learning stuff comes up, many parents are really afraid, you know, especially high school parents, because this is the transition years. This is the years where they're planning their career and their college. And so when you have to cram, let's say you're in an AP calculus class and you have to take it all in one quarter. And then at the end of the year, how do you pass the test? Because if you haven't retained that information. Also, I'm not sure how the union thinks that they can supersede disability rights law by creating their own schedules and their own, without even considering the needs of students with disabilities. So that's opening the district up, and frankly, SCTA up to legal challenges if they're denying students a right to the free and appropriate education. So I just want for this chaos to end. And I feel like other districts in our area are able to do it. They're able to have a distance learning program that's equitable, that gives parents reassurance that their kids will get live instruction and access to their peers. But I just feel like in our district, it's just its own, I don't know. It's not normal. And I don't know how long we can go on this way. And I'm just thankful to the district leadership and to the board for standing up for our students. And I know it's hard because there's a lot of negativity being inaccurate statements and negativity being circulated. So I hope that people will know the truth and that the district is trying to provide consistency for our kids.
Thank you, Angie. Our next speaker is Angel Garcia, also from the Coalition for Students with Disabilities.
Hi, all. I appreciate being invited to this conversation and discussion about our students and the plan for distant learning. Students with disabilities are one of the most disenfranchised and affected disproportionately in terms of regression compared to other students. And when you tack on distance learning, right, there's a reason why we have extended school year for summer, so our students with disabilities try to avoid regressing during that summer. So when you add on distance learning, there's a huge concern in terms of regression. We know from the families that we've talked to from the spring, there were some families that had contact with their teachers, communication, individualized services, and there was many students who did not, who spoke to their teacher 2 times throughout the spring. So that variation is unacceptable. It's illegal. Angie, thank you so much for kind of going through what the issues are, but I really want to first talk about, our Black and Brown students with disabilities who are, most at risk for regression, for discrimination, for lots of things. And so I know over the past few years, the districts try to implement a number of things to really help, students like mine, brown students, Black students, disenfranchised students, from accessing a free and appropriate public education. And unfortunately, there's been a blockade because SCTA does not agree, to many of the things that would help students like mine. Things like Angie mentioned, inclusive practices. Our students deserve to be fully included. And I want to remind folks about the Appendix D, if folks on the phone aren't familiar, there was an illegal clause in the SCTA contract that was advocated for by SCTA from 1994 until 2017, when it was forced to come out of that contract. And things like teachers having a choice as to whether a student with a disability is in their class or not, teachers having a choice as to attend IEP meetings. And we know there's some really great teachers that are very involved, that individualize a student with a disability's education, and there's teachers that are not. And when we're discussing distance learning and individualized education as if it's a choice, when it's not, we got a huge issue. It's not just the district that will be liable for not offering a student a free appropriate public education. If the union is telling their teachers to avoid state law, to not listen to the Americans with Disability Acts, to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, then I would say they're liable. In a regular time when there's not distance learning going on, if a teacher chooses to not follow a student's IEP and the district is telling that teacher what they need to do, the plan is laid out and the teacher is choosing, that teacher can be personally liable. So this is not a choice. This is our student civil rights. This is serious. And if our students are not offered the array of services that are identified in their individual's education plan, there's many people who are going to be liable for that. And we should not do a disservice to our students with disabilities who are already underserved. We really need to be thinking proactively and just, trying to be as flexible as possible. Parents are trying to be as flexible as possible. I turned into a teacher overnight, and I realize and acknowledge the struggles that teachers go through, and they do deserve to be supported, but our students deserve to be educated. And that's basically it. This is not a choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Liz Guillen from Public Advocates.
Hi, am I on?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Liz Guillen, Guillen. I am the Director of Legislative and Community Affairs at Public Advocates. We are a civil rights legal organization in California. Our job is to challenge systemic causes of poverty and racial discrimination by strengthening community voices. And I think the community voices you just heard couldn't be any stronger. The bottom line is that California is obligated to provide an equal educational opportunity under the Constitution. It's more important than ever after all that Sacramento has been through, the dire inequitable impacts of the pandemic. It has exacerbated already existing inequities. And it's all been compounded by the institutional racism that exists in our school system and that has recently been lifted up through the Black Lives Matter movement. These are things that cannot be ignored. Sac City has to provide equal learning opportunities of similar quality, whether in person or at a distance. This must be accessible to all students. The bottom line is that kids need an education, and inconsistent messages are harmful. Adults need to work it out in a way that does not harm students, that provides equal educational opportunity, what our state constitution guarantees. Whatever you work out, it has to serve this basic educational opportunity and recent state law on what needs to be in a distance learning plan, these minimum standards, minutes, substantially similar content, and academic instruction, regular communication, these kinds of issues. Those are minimum standards that the parties really shouldn't be arguing over. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions or comment in other words. Thanks.
Thank you. So now we can take questions from the reporters in the room. If you have a question, please type your name and outlet in the chat box or raise your hand. I believe we've already received a question from Stephanie Lynn. So I am going to unmute you and go ahead and let you ask that question. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Hey, hi Tara, thank you. So we just have two questions. First, is the district still trying to work with the teachers union on adjusting the distance learning plan over the coming days? Or is the expectation that teachers follow the district's distance learning plan moving forward? And the second question is, what is the response to those parents who are, just wondering, hey, why is there still no clear agreement between the union and the district? And we're already at the day before school starts. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Ms. Lynn. Two-part question. I'll answer it. We have not reached an agreement with SCTA. You're right. We did everything we could. When you look at the timeline, when we issued our proposal to SCTA, the number of negotiation sessions that we held on Friday, as you know, we held a mediation that was facilitated by the State Mediation and Conciliation Services. We understand that we will be certified to the next phase, which is called fact-finding. That is a process that doesn't occur within days, unfortunately, because it was Friday, and we don't expect that process to play out until several weeks from now. We did feel that we had the legal obligation to move forward with our distance learning plan as it stood. With our last counter proposal or proposal to SCTA, which we can forward to you as well. That is the expectation that we have in place right now for all of our employees. Let me just say that I started my career as a teacher in 1994, over 25 years ago. So none of what I'm saying is a judgment against teachers. I was a teacher as well. We have fabulous educators in City Unified. I firmly believe that we can transform a high poverty, low performing district into a high poverty, high achieving district. It's what I think is reflected in our distance learning plan, in the number of minutes that we want to see our teachers with our students, in our obligation to be able to communicate with families how our students are doing academically. I firmly believe that the next iteration of an achievement gap in the nation is going to be when we start measuring the rate at which some of our students are going to be able to compensate for the loss and mitigate the impact of this pandemic. But I can tell you, for the vast majority of our students and our families in Sac City, if we don't do what's right, and we don't implement the distance learning plan that we have fashioned, the rate at which they are going to compensate for the loss of instruction is going to be much slower than some of their peers. So this is something that, of course, we take very seriously. Again, I speak to you as a parent, so I am frustrated that we don't have an agreement if I were not superintendent. But as superintendent, I also know that we have an obligation to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our students. We serve a vulnerable, a marginalized community that unfortunately is not producing the results that it should be producing. So we have to redesign very critical elements. And Ms. Garcia and Ms. Sutherland spoke to some of those. And we will make sure that we are meeting those legal obligations, and also that we are making sure that we can provide the kind of consistency that our families should anticipate. This pandemic has had very difficult impacts and circumstances. The last thing that they need is to be confused and feeling the level of anxiety that they've been feeling.
Our next question is from Sara Villegas from Telemundo.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Ok. Superintendente, buenas tardes y rápidamente, Los maestros, ellos están diciendo que tuvieron más de 20 juntas con ustedes, que para ellos se sienten no valorados ante el ver que no hay ninguna negociación todavía. Esa sería mi primera pregunta. ¿Usted qué mensaje, no? O sea, ¿qué es lo que les dice a ellos? Y la segunda, ¿cuál va a ser el plan de estudio? También ellos dicen que cada escuela va a tener su propio horario, como lo han hecho por años, y esto está causando muchísima frustración a los padres de familia.
Muy bien, buenas tardes, muchas gracias, Sara. Buenísimas tus preguntas. La primera que quiero contestar, me gustaría que pudieran informarles a nuestras familias que los horarios ya están en nuestra página de internet, están localizadas en nuestra página de internet, así que con todo gusto, ojalá que puedan tener acceso a esos horarios. Está en el learn.scust.edu, así que los horarios ya están fijados. Lo que viene sucediendo ahorita es que, bien dices tú, nuestro sindicato de maestros ha informado a maestros que no tienen que seguir el plan de estudio que hemos nosotros establecido. Y eso ha creado mucha confusión, muchas ansiedades, muchas preocupaciones, así que nosotros vamos a estar comunicándonos con nuestros padres de familia a lo largo de esta tarde para cerciorar cuál va a ser ese horario que ya está fijado para cada una de nuestras escuelas. Es cierto que en varias de nuestras escuelas hay horarios diferentes si estuviéramos en el plan escolar normal. Es decir, si estuviéramos asistiendo a la escuela físicamente, hay una expectativa donde nosotros queremos que haya consistencia, así que esos horarios son los que nosotros hemos fijado y ya están en nuestra página de internet. En cuanto a tu primera pregunta, mira, para mí, yo empecé mi carrera profesional como maestro. Fui maestro de una escuela secundaria en el Distrito Escolar de Los Ángeles hace más de 25 años, en el 94. Mi esposa ha sido educadora toda su vida también. Y tenemos nosotros educadores en nuestro Distrito de Sacramento que son magníficos. Los admiro día a día. Hacen un trabajo espectacular. Se esmeran en responder a las necesidades de cada uno de nuestros estudiantes. Este es un tema, digamos, a nivel de nuestro sindicato, del distrito, pero yo sigo en admiración de todos nuestros educadores, nuestros maestros, y ojalá que puedan ver que en el plan de estudio que nosotros hemos fijado existe esa admiración. Pero también al igual queremos asegurarnos de que podamos estar trayéndoles a nuestros padres de familia ese nivel de enseñanza que se merecen ellos, no dependiente si conocen el sistema educativo de los Estados Unidos. Mis papás nunca lo pudieron conocer, nunca pudieron ellos con confianza navegarlo. Así que nosotros tenemos una responsabilidad, una obligación de asegurarnos de que estemos con las necesidades académicas, sociales y emocionales también de cada uno de nuestros estudiantes.
And Superintendent, we have a request from Victor Tafoya from ABC 10. If you could repeat the question in English and then respond again.
I'll try my very best. The question was related to sentiment by some of our teachers that we're not valuing them, and I'm certain that others will want to speak to this issue. I want to be very clear that I started my career as a teacher in 1994. I was a high school teacher. None of my comments are a judgment against our teachers because I was a teacher and I know how valuable our teachers are, the role that they play. They are the first in line. They are the ones that build relationships that make our students feel confident, feel that they can reach their true potential. What this is about is making sure that we are setting clear and consistent expectations across our district for each and every one of our 40,000 students. Not that we don't trust or value our teachers. Our students and families need to know what to expect in their classrooms and schools. I mentioned that particularly for our most vulnerable families or most marginalized communities. I can think of my own parents who never were able to master English and certainly never confidently were able to navigate the complex system, which is a K-12 system, a public education system as large as ours in Sac City Unified. So I think that it is very fair that we establish guardrails that are consistent and reflect what's in legislation through Senate Bill 98, what's reflected in state and federal laws that Ms. Garcia mentioned, for example, when it comes to students with disabilities as well, that we follow guidance and SB 98 language about performing and assessing regularly our students so that we can measure their student progress and we can intervene as quickly as we can when we have evidence that our students are falling behind and are not going to be on grade level or demonstrate grade level proficiency, that we have to meet minimum instructional minutes and that we have to demonstrate it. Unlike the spring, we have legislation now where we will be held accountable to be able to demonstrate, to undergo audits where we can show that our students were in front of their teachers, they were accessing high quality instruction. So I just want to be very clear about appreciating our teachers, knowing how dedicated they are, knowing how hardworking they are, but that doesn't mean that we should not provide the clear and consistent expectations to protect the learning of all of our students and have the guardrails that I think are important, particularly given the population of families that we serve who aren't, like my parents, able to confidently navigate the complexities that exist in large urban districts like Sac City Unified. And I don't know, President Ryan, if you'd like to also weigh in on this.
I'm happy to. I'll be very brief. I think that we have to both appreciate the contributions of our wonderful teachers throughout Sacramento City Unified School District and realize that in these extraordinary circumstances, we need clearer guardrails around expectations for high quality student learning. I think that without that, what we see is the potential for variance from school site to school site. And the reality is we want our teachers to continue to do what they do best, which is connect with our students, but we also want to ensure that it's aligned with learning standards, that it's aligned with some clear expectations around live instruction, assessment, and really meeting the needs of our special education students.
Thank you. Our next question is from Pauline Bartolone from Capital Public Radio. Go ahead, Pauline.
Hi there, thanks for holding this meeting. I just wanted to ask Superintendent Aguilar if you could state really clearly for our parents who are really hungry to know what's going on starting tomorrow, what can you say about what the district's plan is? And what will you do if SCTA teachers don't comply with these new guidelines?
Yeah, very good question. What I'm going to do, Ms. Bartolone, is ask Ms. Gallegos to provide our media partners with the last proposal that we submitted to our labor partner, SCTA, so that you can see what is included in that distance learning plan. It does call for a consistency in the schedules depending on the segments. So our elementary, our middle school, our high school, it includes consistency in the amount of time that we expect teachers to be in front of our students through live instruction, what is called synchronous learning. It calls for consistency in the amount of time per day, again, per segment. That is going to be done under what's called asynchronous learning through independent work. That still can be done online in front of a computer screen, if you will. My children did that for the first 2 days where for elementary, for example, we had 1 hour of synchronous learning and the rest of the day to meet the minimum standards that we're obligated to under Senate Bill 98 was done asynchronously. So I want to make sure that you have access to that source document so that you can inform our community of elements that you think they are interested in seeing. In terms of your second question, look, I mean, my sincere hope is that we will not see the kind of variation in alternate schedules that SCTA has indicated to its teachers that they can outline on their own. We will, of course, be monitoring this very closely, but it's exactly why I issued the cease and desist letter, because the last thing we want, given the impact that this pandemic has had on the social and emotional well-being on our students, for example, is to have a student excited about their first full week of class, looking forward to meeting their teacher again, seeing their teacher again since last week, and only to find that that the class is not in session yet. So at this point, I will have to get back to you on that question about what might happen. But for now, I'm hoping that we will all come together and abide by the distance learning plan that we have implemented.
Superintendent, if I can just add, you know, I have been fortunate to be in regular communication with many of our classroom teachers. I was on the phone with a teacher just before this media briefing, and what I have heard from so many of them is that their total commitment is to meeting the needs of our students and families. And so what that looks like is the majority of people I have checked in with are committed to instituting the district's plan. They're working with their principals and other teachers at their school site to align closely to the district's plan, while also figuring out how they can continue to keep in contact with our students and families to relieve their anxiety and to really let them know that it is every intention that they will show up tomorrow and, as they always do, be there to teach our children.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mike Duffy. Go ahead,
Good
Mike.
afternoon. So one of the things that we are hearing from teachers is that they're quite insistent that a one-size-fits-all approach can't work for diverse school groups and different age groups. I want to know how you respond to that. And also parents are going to wonder, you know, how we could have all summer and not have figured something out by now. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, great questions. Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Let me start with the first one, because again, I first will speak to you as a parent. I'm equally frustrated that I don't have that as a parent. I think that if you look at the timeline, and it is on our website, we do have a negotiations dashboard. There was certainly enough time for us to reach resolution around this. And so we will remain committed to advancing this process, going into fact-finding. But we felt obligated to the fact that, you know, that was on Friday, and we needed to implement a plan. So I think it is critical that we give you access to that document and that information. I think, Liz, you want to interject real quickly. I also want to be respectful.
Yes, hi, Liz Guillen with Public Advocates. If you read the district's plan, and if you've been reading the continuous, the learning continuity plan since it was first drafted, even into its second draft, and then the exchange of documents between the district and the union, there is no way there's a one size anything in the district. The district is composed of very many, the highest number of different student groups with exceptional needs. And the latest budget trailer bill, SB 98, makes it really clear that the district's distance learning plan has to address students with unique needs. So one size fits all. There's not an all in the district. The one size might be applied to differing needs, perhaps. But I think that that kind of a statement is really misleading and it gets us off track. This is a really tough job. Students with exceptional needs cut across all, have so many intersections. Some of them are English learners, some of them are foster youth, some are experiencing homelessness. Students who are English learners are also intersecting with those other student group needs. To say that each teacher is going to decide based on what they think a student needs sort of defies a basic standard of, okay, for English learners, we have to do X. And then let's see what those needs are. I hope that's clear.
This is Angel. If I could just chime in real quick. I do want to remind folks that there's a legal obligation to independent evaluation plan meetings. There's an entire IEP team when it comes to a student with a disability. A teacher is a part of that team. A parent is also a part of that team. Special ed specialist, such as a school psychologist or other supports that the student needs based upon their individualized plan are all a part of that team. So unfortunately, with students with disabilities, one part of the team, one person can't just decide what that plan is. It needs to be a team decision outlined in the plan, and that's a legal document.
Thank you, Angel. I do just want to say, I mean, obviously these are really complex issues, but what we're hearing from Liz Guillen and from Angel is that both from a civil rights and a disability rights perspective, we have a legal obligation to quality learning. And so we can want to and commit to respect and value the contributions that our teachers offer throughout the district, and have to be able to demonstrate that we are meeting our legal obligations to our students.
Yeah, the last thing I'll mention, Ms. Gallegos, and I think somebody has their hand up as well, is that this is not unique to Sac City. What's unique to Sac City is that we haven't reached an agreement, but if you look at distance learning plans across the region, across the state, you will see some degree of consistency in scheduling by segment for elementary, for middle, for high schools. And so that's exactly what you'll see in our plan as well. That does not mean that we're doing it because we think that one size fits all. Ms. Guillen makes a very good point. We are obligated to make sure that we are responding to the needs of each and every one of our students. And we know that we have a very high percentage of English learners in our district who have differing needs than in a school district with many fewer. We know we have a large percentage of students with disabilities with exceptional needs, and so we have to respond accordingly as well. We know that there is no way that that one size is going to fit all, but we do think that it's important to have some level of consistency, some guardrails, and within that, then responding through small group instruction, through targeted intervention. Again, it's also why in our plan, we think that we're obligated to offer assessment so that we can continue to monitor regularly and frequently how our students are doing and how they're responding to the interventions that we put in place.
I do also, and just one final thing I want to add, say that, in talking to some of the teachers that I've been connecting with, there is an understanding that there is a schedule that is followed and some expectations around live instruction, but teachers have the ability within that to design lessons that meet the needs of students and align with standards. And I think that that is often missed in these conversations.
Thank you. We also have another guest, Renee Webster Hawkins, who is from the Coalition for Students with Disabilities, and she's had her hand up for a little while, so I am going to call on her. Go ahead, Renee.
Thank you. Yeah, and I also wanted to address the misnotion that the return to learning plan advanced by the district is a one-size-fits-all. In addition to being with the Coalition for Students with Disabilities, I also am the Sacramento regional leader for Decoding Dyslexia California, and have as a parent advocate, a parent of 2 children in the district, have been advocating for years to ensure that this district meets the needs of all of our students that are failing. So there's the legal obligations that every district is subject to, but particularly in our district, as you've heard, our students are flailing. Our district before COVID-19 was worse than 95% of districts in California in terms of meeting the needs of our low income students, our English learners, our Black and Brown scholars, our students with disabilities, and those that are homeless. And just because we're now in distance learning doesn't mean that the district gets a pass on trying to improve the academic and social emotional outcomes in our high poverty district. So, you know, and so I appreciate as being someone who has advocated for years, pushing this district to do better by our students who are downdrafted in our inequitable system. I appreciate and applaud the deep work that the district has done and put into its return to learning plan that attempts to do just that, to lift up every student and to actually provide a differentiated, multi-tiered approach, even through distance learning, so that every student gets access to the education that they deserve. Because it's not just providing the students the access, and that's where the minimum expectations come in, but it's also providing the teachers with the resources and professional development that they need so that they can meet the needs of all of these students. And I think that's what's getting lost in this public debate, is that the district's plan provides all of that. It provides the resources so that teachers can, through synchronous and asynchronous direct instruction, meet the needs of all of these kids. My son sits in the intersection between students with learning disabilities and Black students. In the spring, he completely lost the structure of his school and his general education teachers at his high school. Most of his teachers never even held a single live class on Zoom. He thrived only because he has a privileged mom who was able to take family medical leave and sit by his side and coach him through his asynchronous offline lessons. He was the exception, and I cry thinking of all of his classmates who sit in that same intersection but fell into the chasm of learning loss. So please, if you can take away anything from this, recognize that the district's plan is designed to set, yes, minimum thresholds, but also provide the resources that teachers need to meet the needs, especially of the 7,000 kids in our district who have disabilities and need that extra support in order to thrive.
Thank you, Renee. So we are past 1 o'clock now, and I appreciate everyone for joining us today. I think Superintendent may have some closing remarks. For reporters who are in the attendee room, if you still have questions, please email me, Tara, Tara-Gallegos, Gallegos, @susd.edu, and I will type that into the chat box. Go ahead, Superintendent.
Thank you, Ms. Gallegos, and thank you to all of our media partners for spending the last hour having this discussion. We have lots of work to do still for the very reason that Ms. Webster Hawkins just mentioned. There was a pandemic when it comes to learning in Sac City before the health pandemic, and we owe it to this entire community to pay attention and take heed about the impact of long-lasting impact that pandemic is going to have on a generation of students, not just because they may have not been contacted or did not receive the level of instruction that we would have anticipated, but also because of the summer loss and the summer effect. We owe it to our families to provide not just consistency because we don't want anxiety in their minds, but because we want them to be confident that we are providing a set of expectations across our entire system for all staff members to meet the needs of our students across this entire district. That is what we're committed to. Certainly, I'm not naive. I know the long-standing tension between labor management, but we are still going to remain committed to trying to pierce through that and demonstrate good faith and goodwill so that the beneficiaries are our students and our families in Sacramento. That's what I want as a Sacramentan now for the past 3 years. It's certainly what I want to see as a parent, and of course, it's what I'm striving to do as superintendent. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you to our guests, and thank you to all of those who have joined. Have a great day.